Welcome, weary traveler. You found your way once again to Sleepy Historian, a quiet corner of the internet where the past whispers softly and the present finally slows down. If this kind of calm storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like this video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And if you're awake just long enough, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, drifting off to the same old stories of long-forgotten empires. So dim the lights. Let the distant murmur of Roman voices fill your imagination. Let the soft glow of the oil lamps flicker across marble walls, and allow the hum of ancient life to fade gently into the background. Tonight, we'll explore the quiet and curious side of the Roman world, a collection of odd Roman rituals before bedtime. This is boring history for sleep, calm bedtime storytelling, soft-spoken history documentary, and relaxing history to fall asleep to. A gentle walk through the streets of ancient Rome, where beneath the grandeur of temples and the roar of the Colosseum, there existed a private, quieter world, a world of small beliefs, secret gestures, and nightly habits that shaped the rhythm of Roman life. Tonight's journey unfolds in 4 soft steps. First, we'll wander through the fading light of a Roman household, where the day gives way to the rituals of night, and where simple gestures carry centuries of meaning. Then, we'll follow a certain Roman, a senator, a matron, or perhaps a humble scribe, as the evening deepens, exploring the small superstitions that guided them to rest. Next, we'll drift toward the mysteries, ancient charms, household gods, and the faint fragrance of incense curling through the atrium. Strange beliefs about sleep, dreams, and protection from the unknown. Finally, we'll rise quietly to the world of the elite, those whose evenings were filled with performances, lavish banquets, and whispered prayers to their chosen deities before their attendants drew the curtains. The rhythm will be gentle, the pace unhurried. Each moment will take you a little closer to the end of the day, and perhaps to the edge of sleep itself. So settle in, breathe slowly. Imagine yourself beneath the Roman sky, a soft twilight painted in muted gold, the scent of olive oil lamps mingling with the cool air from the Tiber. The hum of the city is distant now, and the story begins. The Roman day, though busy and filled with the noise of markets and politics, always ended in a gradual, almost ritualistic fading of sound and light. As the sun dipped behind the Palatine Hill, the city began to quiet itself in small, almost imperceptible ways. You can imagine yourself there, standing in one of those narrow, time-worn lanes, feeling the warmth of the paving stones beneath your feet begin to fade with the falling dusk. The scent of olive oil and baked bread still lingers in the air, but slowly it is joined by something gentler, the faint smoke of lamps being lit one by one. For most Romans, the approach of night was not merely a pause between work and sleep. It was a threshold, a time to honor the small spirits of the home, to take simple precautions against the darkness, and to perform acts that had been repeated for generations. The Romans lived by ritual, not necessarily out of piety, but out of habit. Tradition guided the smallest gesture, from the way water was poured before dinner to the precise words murmured when extinguishing the last lamp. Within a typical Roman domus, or house, the first sign of night's arrival came from the slaves. They would move through the rooms, trimming the wicks of oil lamps and refilling them with olive oil. The faint hiss of burning wicks, the gentle splash of oil, and the low, repetitive rhythm of daily chores created a kind of nighttime symphony, a soft accompaniment to the close of day. The paterfamilias, or head of the household, would often walk slowly through the atrium, inspecting each lamp as if ensuring that his ancestors' eyes could still see the home illuminated. Dinner, or cena, would already be concluded by this time, a meal that could range from modest bread and olives to a lavish spread of roasted meats and figs, depending on one's social standing. Afterward, Romans did not rush to bed. They lingered. The wealthy might recline in the triclinium, sipping watered wine while discussing politics or poetry, while the humbler citizens might sit by the doorway, exchanging quiet words with neighbors as the street darkened. And when conversation faded, the household began its nightly rituals, gestures that, while ordinary to them, seem peculiar to us now. A small offering of wine might be poured at the household shrine, the Lararium, dedicated to the protective spirits of the home. Small clay or bronze figures, the Laras and Penates, stood watching in their alcove. The family would offer a few drops of oil or a pinch of flour, a way of saying thank you for surviving another day. It was a soft, almost whispering kind of religion, one that lived not in grand temples, but in quiet corners. As the night deepened, the soundscape of Rome shifted. The streets emptied, but the city never fell fully silent. The creak of cart wheels from distant deliveries, the occasional bark of a dog, the muffled voice of a guard calling across an alleyway. These became the city's lullaby. In wealthier homes, curtains of heavy linen or wool were drawn to keep the night air out, and in humbler dwellings, shutters were closed with small wooden bars. Romans believed the night carried a kind of uncertainty, not merely the danger of thieves, but the unseen world of spirits that stirred when the sun fell. Before sleep, some would murmur simple charms or trace small signs over their beds for protection. Children were told to keep a sprig of laurel nearby or a small amulet of red coral, believed to guard against the malocchio, the evil eye. In these final moments before sleep, the home became a sanctuary. The fire in the hearth dimmed, reduced to quiet embers. The last lamplight trembled on plaster walls painted with scenes of gods and gardens. The rhythm of life slowed until it nearly stopped. Each movement, folding a garment, setting aside a cup, closing a door, was deliberate, unhurried. The Romans did not measure time as we do. There were no glowing clocks, no alarms waiting for morning. The passage from day to night was felt rather than counted, marked by scent, sound, and shadow. For them, the transition into sleep was as much a part of life as waking. To sleep well was not a luxury. It was a form of harmony with the cosmos. The stars above, the warmth of the walls, the distant city breathing, all belonged to the same rhythm. And so, as you imagine yourself in that fading Roman twilight, picture the soft orange light of the lamps flickering across mosaic floors, the gentle murmur of voices in the courtyard, and the calm certainty that, even in a world so ancient, the rituals of night have always been the same. A surrender to stillness, a quiet letting go. As the final traces of twilight vanished behind the rooftops, the Roman household slipped into a pattern of nightly order, one that felt timeless, almost ceremonial. Though there were no clocks to mark the hour, the body seemed to know when it was time to prepare for rest. The rhythm of the city, from the patrician villas on the Palatine Hill to the crowded insulae apartments of the poor, was built around repetition, the steady comfort of doing the same small things each night before sleep. Imagine yourself now inside a modest Roman home. The air is cool, faintly scented with olive oil smoke and drying herbs that hang from the rafters. In the corner, a small clay lamp flickers on a wooden table. Shadows move gently across the walls, painted in earthy reds and ochres. The evening meal has long been cleared away. A servant quietly sweeps the floor with a bundle of twigs, while another folds simple linen garments for the morning. There is no noise of machinery, no light beyond the steady amber glow of the lamp. Only stillness, punctuated by the faint chirping of crickets somewhere outside. Before bed, cleanliness was considered both practical and spiritual. Romans might wash their hands and faces using a small bronze basin filled with water, scented by a few leaves of mint or rosemary. Wealthier families kept bowls of rosewater or even wine for cleansing. It wasn't a bath in the modern sense, just a gentle ritual of renewal. In homes without plumbing, a slave would fetch the water from a public fountain, warmed slightly over the hearth. The steam would rise slowly, curling like mist through the dim room. Then came the prayers, small, whispered invocations to household spirits. The Laras and Penates were guardians of the hearth, protectors of the family's prosperity. Romans believed these spirits needed acknowledgement every day. A few drops of oil or wine were offered at their shrine, sometimes with murmured words asking for peaceful dreams or health in the morning. For many, these acts were done without deep thought, just as you might switch off a light before bed. Yet within them lived the memory of centuries. The same gestures have been performed by ancestors long gone and by countless others across the empire. In some homes, a bowl of milk or breadcrumbs might be left out overnight, a humble offering to wandering spirits or even to the household mice, creatures which Romans treated with a mix of annoyance and superstition. It was said that ignoring the spirits of the night could invite bad luck or restless sleep. So, each small act of attention became a shield against the unknown. Sleep itself held deep meaning in Roman thought. It was seen as both a gift from the gods and a brief visit to another realm. The goddess Somnus, sleep, and his mother Nox, night, were imagined as gentle, shadowy figures who spread rest over mortals. To offend them was to invite fatigue and troubled dreams. For this reason, Romans avoided arguments or loud disturbances at night. Even laughter was sometimes softened, as though the household feared to wake something unseen. In poorer neighborhoods, the atmosphere was different, but no less ritualized. A family living in an upper floor of an insula might have only one lamp to light the room. The walls, bare and cracked, caught the flicker of its small flame. Children would curl together beneath coarse blankets of wool, and the parents might share a final crust of bread or speak softly of the coming day's labor. They too made their offerings, even if it was just a muttered thanks before blowing out the lamp. Throughout the city, the signs of sleep spread gradually. Shutters closing one after another, door bolts sliding into place, footsteps fading. The streets dimmed, save for the glow of the watchmen's torches and the ever-burning lamps in front of certain shrines. To those who stayed awake, the night guards, the bakers preparing dough for morning, or the sailors at the river docks, the city at night felt almost sacred, cloaked in stillness. In the quietest hour, one could hear the subtle sounds of life continuing. A mule stamping in its stall, water dripping into a cistern, the sigh of wind through marble columns. The Romans called this time Nox Profunda, the deep night. It was both feared and revered, a space between worlds. Some believed that the dreams which came during these hours carried messages from the gods or from the dead. A dream seen too clearly, it was said, might alter one's destiny. For this reason, some Romans placed small charms near their beds. A tiny figurine of Mercury for travelers, or a sprig of rue tide with red thread for protection. Even those skeptical of superstition often kept these tokens, not necessarily out of belief, but because not doing so might tempt misfortune. In the Roman mind, precaution was wisdom, and so the night closed around them gently, like a great dark blanket. The lamplight dimmed to a single flame, then to embers. The scent of oil grew faint. The household gods stood silent at their post, watching over the sleeping family. In the background, the hum of the city's eternal heart beat softly on, a reminder that even as one home slept, thousands of others did the same. In this rhythm of repetition, the Romans found a kind of peace. They believed that to live well was to follow the customs of one's ancestors, and that every small ritual, every folded garment, every whispered prayer, every extinguished lamp, was a step toward that harmony. Theirs was a world shaped not only by conquest and glory, but by these small, nightly gestures of order in the midst of uncertainty. The day had ended. The lamps were dark. The empire dreamed. The city of Rome, even at rest, was never truly silent. Beneath the stillness of night, it breathed softly, a living organism of stone, light, and memory. If you were to walk through its streets under the silver glow of the moon, you would notice how the noises of the day had been replaced by subtler sounds. The distant trickle of water from a fountain, the faint flutter of linen curtains in an upper window, the quiet shuffle of a stray cat. It was in this world of hushed movement that the Romans surrendered themselves to sleep and dreams. Inside the houses, the fire in the hearth burned low, and the scent of olive oil lamps hung gently in the air. Sleep came differently to each class. The wealthy reclined on soft mattresses stuffed with wool or feathers, wrapped in fine linens. Their bedrooms, cubicula, were decorated with frescoes of pastoral scenes, shepherds tending flocks, or gods guiding the stars across the sky. The humbler citizens, by contrast, slept on straw pallets, often shared with family or fellow workers. The rough texture of the bedding, the faint chill from the open window, and the steady rhythm of breathing formed the quiet symphony of ordinary Roman nights. For all Romans, sleep was considered both a necessity and a mystery. They did not see it merely as rest for the body, but as a form of travel, the soul's temporary departure from the waking world. Philosophers debated its nature endlessly. The Stoics viewed it as a rehearsal for death, while followers of Epicurus considered it simply a natural function of the flesh. Yet among the people, in whispers and superstition, dreams were treated as divine messages. A dream might foretell the future, reveal an illness, or offer guidance from the gods. Temples dedicated to healing deities, such as Asclepius, even allowed the sick to sleep within their walls, hoping that a dream would bring divine instruction for recovery. This practice, known as incubation, made the night itself sacred, a time when communication between mortal and divine became possible. But not all dreams were welcome. Romans believed that certain nights were visited by malevolent spirits, known as lemurs or larvae. These restless dead were said to wander among the living, disturbing sleep or sowing fear in dreams. To guard against them, families performed small household rites. A father might rise in the middle of the night, walk barefoot through the house, and throw black beans behind him while murmuring prayers to drive away the shades. It was a quiet ritual, both eerie and comforting, repeated each year during the Lemuria festival. Even when it wasn't that season, some households echoed those protective gestures privately, soft reminders that the boundary between worlds was thin. For the sleepless, remedies were both practical and symbolic. A cup of warm wine diluted with honey might soothe the body, while placing a laurel leaf beneath the pillow was thought to calm restless dreams. Some Romans used gentle fragrances, lavender, rose, or crushed myrtle, to encourage peaceful slumber. The idea of scent guiding sleep feels familiar even now, though their world was lit by flame and shadow instead of electric glow. Beyond the walls, the city itself dreamed in its own way. The watchmen patrolled with torches, their footsteps echoing faintly in the alleys. In the bakeries near the Tiber, ovens already burned for the morning loaves. A few taverns remained open, where merchants or sailors spoke in low voices about distant voyages. The moon cast long, silvery lines across the cobblestones, making the worn stones shimmer as though the gods themselves had laid down paths of light. Sometimes, the cries of night animals drifted over the rooftops. An owl, a creature sacred to Minerva, was both a sign of wisdom and a harbinger of change. To hear its call near one's home might bring unease. And yet, for the weary, it became another layer of the city's nocturnal rhythm, a reminder that Rome lived and breathed through all its hours. In their beds, Romans turned slowly in sleep, carried by dreams that were often colored by the same things that filled their waking lives. The marketplace, the river, the baths, the faces of loved ones. Yet some dreams were stranger, glimpses of gods, of distant lands, or of things that had not yet come to pass. They did not dismiss these visions lightly. In the morning, one might visit an interpres somnorum, a dream interpreter, who would listen carefully, then connect symbols to omens. A lion might mean victory, a broken lamp, loss, a flowing river, change. Even those who claimed to reject superstition often listened, because sleep in Rome was never simply rest. It was a form of communion with ancestors, with the gods, and perhaps with something within themselves that they did not entirely understand. As the night stretched toward dawn, the softest noises began to stir once more. The faint sweep of a broom in the courtyard, the clatter of tools as bakers and craftsmen returned to work. The darkness thinned, shadows shortened, Lamps were extinguished, and in that fragile moment before sunrise, there was peace, the quiet pause between dreaming and waking, between the world of myth and the world of marble. For 2,000 years, that peace remains familiar. Even now, when you close your eyes and drift toward sleep, you are not so far from those Romans. The same breathing, the same small thoughts before slumber, the same wish for gentle dreams. The city has changed. The empire is gone, but the rhythm of the night endures. Imagine, for a moment, that the year is 63 CE. The Roman Empire is at its height, vast, powerful, glittering with marble and ambition. And somewhere in the heart of that empire, within a villa on the Esquiline Hill, a man named Gaius Petronius Arbiter prepares for the quiet hours of night. Gaius was no ordinary Roman. He was a writer, a statesman, and, by the gossip of his time, a man of refined taste, someone the historian Tacitus would later call the arbiter of elegance. Yet despite his position in Nero's decadent court, Petronius valued one thing above spectacle: the calm pleasure of the evening, when the city's noise softened and the burdens of politics could drift away. In his villa, the twilight filtered through latticed windows, painting long stripes of amber across the mosaic floor. The sounds of the household slowed, the creak of a wooden door, the murmur of servants finishing their duties, the faint song of a lyre from another room. Outside, the Tiber carried its dark water silently toward the sea. Inside, Gaius moved with deliberate ease, as though each gesture itself was part of an unspoken ritual. He often began the evening with a bath, not the crowded, public thermae of the day, but a private chamber filled with steam and the scent of heated oils. The Romans believed that cleansing the body before night restored balance to the spirit. The water, drawn by attendants and poured into a shallow marble basin, shimmered in the lamplight. Gaius would sit quietly as warm water was ladled over his shoulders, the air thick with calm. He was not a man rushing towards sleep, but rather one easing into it like an artist into paint, slowly, with care. After bathing, he wrapped himself in a soft linen robe, fastened loosely with a belt of woven wool. He would often take a cup of spiced wine, gently warmed, not for intoxication, but to quiet the mind. The Romans mixed their wine with water, sometimes flavored with honey, pepper, or herbs. Gaius preferred a touch of cinnamon, imported from distant lands his imagination loved to wander through. He would hold the cup, feeling its warmth seep into his hands, and watch the light of the lamps tremble across the surface. In that stillness, he often read. Scrolls of poetry, philosophy, or satire were kept near his bed. Seneca, perhaps, or Virgil. The act of reading aloud, even softly to oneself, was part of the Roman rhythm of thought. The words, spoken into the quiet, seemed to bridge the gap between mind and matter. And in that soft murmur of Latin verse, Gaius found calm. The household around him observed its own rituals. Slaves moved silently, drawing curtains, checking the locks, and setting out small offerings at the lararium. One placed a sprig of laurel beside the door, another refilled the oil lamps. They did so with the quiet understanding that such gestures preserved not only safety, but continuity, the invisible order that held Roman life together. When all was prepared, Gaius would stand by the small altar in his atrium. The flicker of the flame painted shadows across his thoughtful face. He would pour a few drops of wine, bow his head, and whisper a short invocation, not to the emperor or the state gods, but to the household spirits and to sleep itself. In his mind, the world of politics, intrigue, and performance fell away. The night was for repose, for small thoughts, for dreams that belonged only to him. It was said that Gaius Petronius possessed a temperament both sharp and tranquil, a rare balance of wit and detachment. Perhaps that calm came from evenings like these, spent away from the decadence of Nero's banquets, when the only sound was the steady crackle of the lamps and the soft flutter of the curtains. His was a mind drawn to the texture of life, the curve of a cup, the rhythm of language, the muted gleam of bronze in the half-dark. Sleep came to him not as escape, but as art. The bedchamber itself reflected that idea. Walls painted with scenes of gardens and myth, a couch of cedar, and a single lamp left burning, its flames steady and golden. As he lay down, the cool linen touched his skin, and the faint smell of olive oil drifted upward from the lampstand. He could hear the soft murmur of Rome outside, distant footsteps, a wagon's wheel echoing, the slow hum of an empire still turning. Somewhere beyond the hills, the moon rose over the city, silvering the rooftops. Gaius closed his eyes, and the night folded gently around him. Perhaps he dreamt of words unwritten, of conversations yet to come, of laughter echoing in marble halls. Or perhaps, like many Romans, he simply drifted into the quiet dark, trusting the gods to guard his rest. For all his refinement and intellect, he shared the same small truth as every person in Rome, that even the most powerful must eventually surrender to sleep. The emperor, the poet, the slave, all lay beneath the same stars, all drew the same breath of the night air. In those hours, the hierarchies of the waking world dissolved. Only the rhythm of dreams remained. And so the night passed in silence, broken only by the faint whisper of oil burning in the lamp, a flame as delicate and enduring as the Roman spirit itself. As the empire's nights passed quietly over Rome, the story of Gaius Petronius unfolded not in peace, but in subtle tension. His evenings may have been serene, but beyond his villa walls, the court of Emperor Nero seethed with suspicion, envy, and decay. Petronius lived at the very edge of that storm, a man admired for his taste, yet doomed by the elegance that made him irresistible. Petronius' days were spent in the circles of influence. He had once been a consul and later became arbiter elegantiae, the judge of taste and refinement in Nero's household, an honorary position that reflected more than mere luxury. To Nero, obsessed with art and theatrical splendor, Petronius was both muse and mirror. His council shaped the emperor's entertainments, his banquets, even the way torches burned at imperial feasts. But the Roman court was a theater of masks, and behind its laughter, whispers turned sharp. Tigellinus, the ruthless commander of the Praetorian Guard, envied Petronius' closeness to the emperor. His intrigues twisted Nero's trust into paranoia. One morning, Petronius was accused of conspiracy. The same emperor who had once celebrated his wit now looked upon him with suspicion. Petronius understood what that meant. In Nero's Rome, accusation was merely a formality before death. Yet he met his fate as he had lived, with composed irony. While others begged or fled, Petronius chose a different path, to die with the same calm grace that had defined his life. It is said that he opened his veins not in panic, but in rhythm, closing and reopening them to prolong the end, speaking lightly with his friends as the blood ebbed. Around him, a final feast continued. Wine was poured, poetry read, and laughter, quiet, almost tender, filled the room. He treated death as the ultimate performance, a final assertion of freedom over fear. Tacitus, writing decades later, would immortalize that night. He described how Petronius, in his final hours, composed verses, broke his signet ring so no word of his could be twisted after his death, and refused to utter false flattery of the emperor. He died as he had lived, elegantly detached, a man who believed in the aesthetic of control, even at the threshold of oblivion. And when morning came, the city stirred unaware. Somewhere in the imperial palace, Nero rehearsed his songs, Tigellinus plotted anew, and the Tiber flowed indifferent through its ancient course. Yet in the quiet chambers where Petronius had spent his nights, with scrolls and lamps and wine scented with cinnamon, the air must have felt strangely still. His villa, they say, stood empty for months. Dust gathered on the mosaics, the lamps cooled, and the faint smell of olive oil faded from the air. The marble basin where he once bathed caught only the reflection of moonlight. The quiet was almost reverent, as though the house itself remembered the stillness of its master. Centuries passed, and Petronius' name nearly vanished. Only fragments of his work survived, most notably the Satyricon, a sprawling, satirical novel that drifted between comedy, poetry, and the grotesque. It was unlike anything Rome had produced, vivid, mocking, and strangely modern. Through it, scholars glimpsed his mind, sharp, ironic, aware of human absurdity, yet never cruel. In that text, one senses a man weary of the excess he witnessed. The feasts of Trimalchio, with their overfilled dishes and tasteless grandeur, are more than fiction. They are reflections of Nero's Rome, seen through the eyes of one who loved beauty but saw it dying beneath vanity. The Satyricon reads like a dream that turns slightly sour, a smile that fades into silence. And yet, through satire, Petronius preserved something luminous. His writing carries the scent of real life, laughter, longing, and the bittersweet music of impermanence. Beneath the irony, there is tenderness. He understood that even in corruption, humanity could be found in small gestures. The warmth of a bath, the softness of lamplight, the quiet dignity of one's final evening. When later generations rediscovered him, they saw not merely a victim of Nero's cruelty, but an artist of restraint, a philosopher of beauty in decay. In the candlelit monasteries of the Middle Ages, scribes copied fragments of his work by hand, their ink tracing the remnants of a vanished world. To them, Petronius was a mystery, a pagan aesthete whose calm defied death, whose laughter echoed faintly through time. It is easy now to imagine him once more in that Roman twilight, reclining on a couch, the scent of spiced wine in the air. The world outside burns with ambition, but inside there is peace. His lamp flickers softly, and he listens to the hush between moments, where thought becomes feeling. If one could step into that scene, it would not feel ancient. It would feel human, because beneath the marble and myth, Petronius represents something universal, the longing to live beautifully, even when the world turns cruel. He teaches that elegance is not luxury, but composure, that dignity is not defiance, but stillness, and that death, when met without fear, becomes not tragedy, but closure. Tonight, when you lie in bed and watch the dim glow of your room, think of Petronius, the man who found serenity in the empire's chaos. He lived in a world of empire and intrigue, yet his spirit sought only calm. Perhaps, in the soft spaces between your thoughts, you might hear the same silence that filled his final evening, a silence not of endings, but of perfect, gentle rest. The oil burns low, the stars will slowly above the ruins of Rome, and the world breathes again. Gaius Petronius, arbiter of elegance, still lingers in that timeless moment, where art and life become one, and the night at last is kind. When dusk fell over ancient Rome, the city changed its rhythm. The clamor of merchants faded, the heat of the day dissolved into the stone, and a quieter Rome began to emerge, one defined not by politics or conquest, but by superstition, ritual, and reflection. Night in Rome was never merely an absence of light. It was a time suspended between the human and the divine. Imagine yourself standing on a Roman street at twilight. The paving stones, still warm from the day's sun, breathe a faint heat beneath your sandals. A vendor closes his stall, drawing a curtain of coarse linen over amphorae of wine. The air hums with the scent of olive smoke, mingled with the sweetness of figs left too long in the open. Somewhere nearby, a fountain murmurs softly, its voice the only sound that does not belong to people. As darkness deepened, the Romans believed invisible forces grew stronger. This was the realm of the Laras and Penates, the household spirits that guarded every home. To neglect them was to invite unease, not catastrophe, but a subtle wrongness, as though one's life had slipped slightly out of rhythm. And so, before retiring for the night, Romans performed quiet rituals meant to restore balance between the mortal and the unseen. A small offering of bread, wine, or honey might be placed before the hearth. The gesture was gentle, almost automatic, like tucking in an old friend. Families whispered brief prayers, not with urgency, but with routine calm. The household fire was more than light. It was continuity itself, a symbol of stability in a world that could change without warning. In wealthier homes, slaves moved through the halls with oil lamps, lighting alcoves and doorways. The flicker of flame painted gentle movement across mosaic floors, turning each tile into a shifting constellation. The house seemed to breathe. Every shadow held a faint suggestion of the divine. Every sound, the creak of wood, the sigh of wind through the atrium, seemed to hint at an older language, spoken only in the dark. Nighttime was also the hour of somnia, the dreams. To the Romans, dreams were not private fictions, but messages, sometimes divine, sometimes deceptive. Entire books were written to interpret them. A dream of water could signify clarity or danger. A dream of a locked door might speak of the soul's confinement. Before sleep, many whispered invocations to Somnus, the god of sleep, and his mother Nox, the goddess of night herself. Their domain was not frightening. It was fertile ground for the unseen, a soft corridor through which mortal minds wandered toward the realm of the gods. For those who could afford it, special amulets were worn to bed. Tiny carvings of Mercury or Apollo, or charms shaped like eyes or serpents, were believed to guard against nightmares, entities the Romans called lemurs or larvae. These restless spirits were thought to linger in corners, waiting for darkness to fall. But most Romans did not fear them. They respected them, offering milk or grain during the festival of Lemuria, so that the dead might rest contentedly and the living sleep in peace. The city itself changed character after sundown. The grand forums and public baths emptied, while the narrow alleys filled with whispers and distant songs. Watchmen patrolled with torches, and the sound of their sandals echoed through stone archways. From the temples on the Capitoline Hill, the glow of eternal fires shimmered faintly, a reminder that even at night, Rome never entirely slept. Archaeologists have discovered traces of these nocturnal rituals. Charred remains of offerings near thresholds, small altars hidden behind domestic walls, and faint burn marks where lamps once hung in steady devotion. In some excavated homes, the frescoes of household gods remain perfectly preserved, tiny, painted figures, frozen in perpetual guardianship, their eyes bright with ochre pigment even after 2,000 years. It's curious how much effort the Romans devoted to maintaining calm at night. To them, order was not simply a daytime matter of laws and discipline. It was something spiritual, woven through each hour. The night, with its quiet and mystery, was a testing ground for balance, between fear and faith, between the visible and the invisible. If you were to walk through a Roman villa at that hour, you might see the family gathered near the hearth, a final conversation drifting into silence. The slaves retreat to their quarters, their shadows long on the plaster walls. A cat slips through the courtyard, tail flicking like a whisper. The lamps burn low, their flames reflected in the polished bronze of the household shrine. The air smells faintly of ashes and beeswax. And somewhere, perhaps in the heart of the city, a priest walks through the temple of Vesta, ensuring that the sacred fire still lives. The crackle of flame is gentle, not fierce, but constant. Its light dances across the marble columns, illuminating the carved faces of the gods who watch silently through the long Roman night. The Romans did not fear sleep as an escape from life. They saw it as a necessary surrender, a sacred imitation of death that promised renewal. To drift into dreams was to align oneself with the cosmic order, to momentarily dissolve into the rhythm of the universe itself. And so, as the empire around them slept, they trusted that the morning would come, and with it, the steady return of light. Now, as your own room grows quiet, imagine those distant fires, thousands of small lamps flickering across ancient Rome, each a fragile echo of belief. Imagine the breath of those who once prayed, and how the same stars look down upon them. The night has always been the same, even when the world has changed. You, too, are part of that rhythm, the gentle exchange between wakefulness and rest, the simple trust that the dawn will return. Beneath the surface of the Roman world, in the quiet places where torchlight flickered against cold stone, there existed sanctuaries devoted entirely to sleep. They were called Asclepia, temples dedicated to the god Asclepius, where healing was sought not through medicine or magic, but through dreams. The Romans had adopted these from the Greeks, blending them with their own sensibilities. To them, the mind in rest was not idle. It was porous, receptive to divine influence. Within the silence of slumber, gods could whisper truths that waking thought could never hold. Imagine approaching one of these temples at dusk. The air grows cooler as you descend the steps, and the scent of incense clings faintly to the walls. You pass a statue of Asclepius, his serpent-entwined staff glinting in the low light. The marble feels alive under your fingers, smooth, cool, and faintly damp from the evening air. Here, those who sought healing came to practice incubation, the sacred act of sleeping within the temple itself. They would bathe first in purified water, cleanse themselves of worldly distractions, and then lie upon the temple floor or on simple pallets of straw. Around them, the priests moved softly, chanting invocations, the sound echoing like distant waves through the columns. Sleep came slowly in such places. The mind wandered through half-lit corridors of thought, guided by murmured prayers and the faint sound of water trickling through stone channels. Sometimes a dream would come, a vision of a serpent, a god, or a luminous figure who touched the dreamer's wounds. When morning came, priests interpreted these visions, offering gentle remedies or symbolic advice. Modern archaeologists have uncovered the ruins of these sleep sanctuaries across the Mediterranean, in Rome, in Ostia, in the hills of Campania, at Epidaurus in Greece. Inscriptions still survive, carved by grateful patients who claim to have been healed through divine sleep. One reads simply, "I saw the god in my dream, and I awoke whole." In the Roman world, these temples represented something subtle, a blending of religion and psychology long before such words existed. Healing through dreams acknowledged that the mind itself was a vessel of mystery. Within it, pain, faith, and imagination intertwined, guided by rhythms older than reason. There were other places, too, where the Romans sought meaning in slumber. Some ventured to the cave of Trophonius in Boeotia, a site so ancient it was already legendary in their time. Pilgrims entered narrow tunnels carved deep into the earth, where they lay in darkness and silence, waiting for visions. When they emerged, pale and dazed, they were said to speak in riddles, touched, briefly, by the wisdom of the underworld. These experiences may seem strange now, but they tell us something enduring about human nature. Across centuries, people have turned to sleep not just for rest, but for revelation. The boundary between consciousness and dream has always been thin, a veil that shimmers when the world grows quiet. The Romans, in their calm reverence for order, recognized that mystery was not the enemy of reason, but its companion. In more humble homes, without temples or priests, sleep rituals still carried echoes of these beliefs. A mother might whisper a charm over her child's pillow, invoking Somnus or Fortuna. A traveler might place a sprig of laurel beneath his bed to ward off bad dreams. Even soldiers on campaign, sleeping beneath the open sky, were known to speak small prayers to the moon, asking that their spirits wander safely in the realm of dreams and return whole at dawn. To fall asleep, in that world, was not a solitary act. It was part of a vast exchange between gods and mortals, body and soul, earth and sky. The gentle closing of eyes was seen as a surrender to something both sacred and necessary. Sleep connected the smallest household to the stars, linking the flicker of a bedroom lamp to the eternal fire of the heavens. Excavations near ancient sanctuaries sometimes reveal curious artifacts. Terracotta offerings shaped like limbs, eyes, or hearts. Tokens left by those who hoped for healing. These votives, silent and motionless now, once represented living prayers. They remind us that faith was not always loud or grand. Sometimes it was as soft as the breath of someone drifting in a sleep beneath an open sky. You can almost imagine it. A line of worshippers at twilight, each carrying a small lamp, their faces illuminated by gentle flame. They move slowly into the temple courtyard, their shadows stretching across mosaic floors. Around them, the night hums with crickets, and a faint scent of laurel drifts through the air. One by one, the lamps are placed before the altar until the space glows like a constellation of earthbound stars. For the Romans, this ritual light was more than illumination. It was trust made visible, the quiet assurance that even in darkness, one could reach for peace. In sleep, they believed the boundaries dissolved. Gods could walk through dreams, the sick could find healing, and grief could soften into acceptance. It is perhaps comforting to think that across centuries, across languages and empires, people have closed their eyes under the same sky and surrendered to the same quiet unknown. The temples are ruins now. Their columns are broken, their altars silent. But the act of sleep remains unchanged, the same ritual, endlessly renewed. So as you rest tonight, imagine yourself beneath those ancient ceilings, the air cool and filled with the scent of burning oil. Imagine the soft murmur of priests, the faint rustle of robes, the calm presence of a sleeping God. You do not need to seek a vision or a miracle, only stillness. The same stillness that healed countless others long ago when Rome was young and the stars were closer to the earth. Every culture has its night of spirits, that quiet threshold when the living look back toward the departed and whisper softly so as not to wake what should remain at peace. For the Romans, that time came in May, during a festival called Lemuria, 3 nights devoted to appeasing restless souls. The Lemuria was neither morbid nor celebratory. It was a ritual of stillness, humility, and reconciliation. It reminded Romans that death was not a clean departure, but a lingering presence, a thread that continued to hum softly in the background of daily life. Imagine yourself in the Roman night. The city is subdued, its streets empty, its usual clamor hushed. The moon rises pale and cold over the tiled rooftops, and in countless homes, lamps flicker low. Within these homes, heads of families perform a ritual as old as memory itself. Barefoot and dressed simply, they walk through the silent house at midnight. In one hand, they hold black beans, humble, unassuming, and yet believed to carry power. In the other, they raise a hand in a gesture of calm dismissal. With slow steps, they cast the beans behind them, one by one, murmuring the same phrase 9 times. Haec ego mitto, his redimo, mic miasc fabis. With these beans, I redeem myself and mine. It is a transaction of peace, an offering to those unseen. The beans are said to satisfy the lemurs, the restless shades of the dead, who wander briefly through the mortal world on those nights. Behind the father, his family waits in silence. No one looks back, for to meet the gaze of the spirit world was to invite unease. Afterward, he rinses his hands, touches bronze, a symbol of purification, and strikes it rhythmically, the soft metallic sound echoing through the halls. It is not a warning, but a farewell. The ritual concludes with a final invocation, gently sending the spirits away until the next year. This scene, repeated quietly across Rome, carried a strange kind of tenderness. It acknowledged what all civilizations eventually confront, that the dead never truly leave, but live on in memory, in story, in the fragile continuity of ritual. The Lemuria was not about fear. It was about balance, ensuring that both the living and the departed found their rightful places in the great cycle of existence. Archaeologists have uncovered faint traces of these observances, small bowls containing charred beans, fragments of amulets buried near thresholds, and inscriptions invoking the favor of the household dead, the manes. In a few Roman epitaphs, the phrase sit tibi terra levis appears again and again. May the earth be light upon you, a a gentle wish, half prayer, half lullaby. What makes Lemuria so moving is its ordinariness. There were no grand temples, no roaring fires, no crowds of spectators. It was a private ritual, enacted in whispers, guided by memory. The Romans lived among their ancestors, carrying them in quiet acknowledgement. The city itself was a vast necropolis. Beneath nearly every district, tombs lined the old roads. To live in Rome was to live above layers of remembrance, the echo of countless lives pressing softly upward through the earth. Even the word haunting carried a different meaning for them. To the Romans, a ghost was not necessarily a source of terror, but a reminder of continuity. The lemurs were unsettling not because they sought harm, but because they reflected the persistence of being, the idea that life, once begun, does not entirely end. Later writers, such as Ovid, would describe the festival with poetic calm. In his Fasti, he notes the father's midnight walk, the beans, the ninefold repetition, and the turning away from the past. The detail that follows is quietly human. The house remains silent until dawn, and then, as if by unspoken agreement, normal life resumes. Bread is baked, water drawn, laughter returns. The world continues, gently restored. If one were to witness it, if somehow you could drift back through time and stand in a Roman doorway that night, you would not see fear. You would see stillness. You would hear the faint jingle of bronze, the soft sound of beans striking the floor, and the calm voice of someone speaking into the dark, not to command, but to soothe. The Lemuria was, in its way, a form of therapy, an ancient meditation on grief and remembrance. It allowed the Romans to express respect for death without being consumed by it. The repetition of the ritual, year after year, kept memory alive in manageable form. It was how they learned to live with the knowledge that everything loved must one day pass, and yet somehow remains. Even centuries later, when Christianity took root in Rome, echoes of Lemuria endured. The festival's themes of honoring the dead and ensuring their peace evolved into new traditions. All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day, the lighting of candles at graves. The forms changed, but the emotion remained. Love transmuted into ritual, remembrance softened into rhythm. In this sense, the Romans were never far from us. They, too, lay awake some nights, wondering about those who came before. They, too, sought peace through repetition, through the comfort of familiar words and gestures. And like us, they found that the act of remembering quiet, patient, reverent, could itself be a kind of rest. So when you next close your eyes, think of those Roman homes, dimly lit and hushed. Think of the father walking slowly through his atrium, casting beans behind him as he murmurs into the darkness. His steps are unhurried. His voice is steady. He is not afraid. He is simply maintaining the balance between the seen and the unseen, between waking and sleep. And just as he ends his ritual by striking bronze to clear the air, so too can you let go of the day's noise. The world settles. The air grows still. The past rests. The present softens, and the night becomes a gentle space where all things, for a moment, are at peace. While the common people of Rome slept under modest tiled roofs, lulled by the hum of crowded streets, the upper class, senators, patricians, and merchants of new fortune, drifted into another kind of night. Their evenings were not ruled by silence or beans thrown to the dead, but by the glow of oil lamps reflected on marble walls, by the soft murmur of fountains and the delicate rustle of silk. Night for the Roman elite was a performance. It was the moment when power could rest in comfort, when politics and ceremony gave way to ritualized luxury. Theirs was a world scented with imported myrrh, warmed by bronze braziers, attended by quiet slaves who moved like shadows. Picture an atrium opening into a peristyle garden. The moonlight filters through columns of white stone. Beyond them, peacocks doze on low walls. The wealthy owner reclines on a couch embroidered with fine patterns from the east. Near him, musicians pluck at soft-stringed lyres, creating melodies that barely disturb the air. These were the convivia nocturna, evening gatherings that blurred the line between feast and dream. Guests arrived in flowing garments dyed with Tyrian purple, a pigment so costly that it could buy a modest house. The meal was slow and deliberate. Honeyed dormice, olives soaked in brine, fruits glazed in wine, and bread so white it seemed untouched by earth. But beyond the feasting was something subtler, rituals of beauty, of presence, of calm. Before sleep, patrician women might bathe in warm milk infused with rose petals. Wealthy men might anoint their hands with oil scented with cinnamon or iris root. Servants would draw fine linen curtains, ensuring the air remained perfumed and still. These small gestures, mundane, repetitive, almost ceremonial, formed their own kind of religion, the worship of comfort, of continuity, of order against the chaos of the world outside. The Roman night for the elite was also a time for quiet superstition. Many kept small shrines, lauraria, even in their opulent homes. Behind polished bronze doors or marble niches, figurines of household gods, the Lauras and Penates, watched over the sleeping house. Before retiring, a servant might light a tiny lamp before them, murmuring a soft offering for safety through the hours of darkness. The flame was allowed to burn low, symbolizing not only protection, but the eternal watchfulness of Rome itself. Despite their grandeur, even these men and women carried a private fear of fragility. Beneath marble and silk, they knew that fortune was fickle. Senators fell, families declined, and houses once brilliant became tombs of memory. To guard against envy and fate, the wealthy often wore charms, small bits of coral or ivory shaped like hands or animals, meant to deflect the malocchio, the evil eye. In one villa near Pompeii, archaeologists found such an amulet beneath a pillow, carved with the words Felicitas Nocturna, happiness by night. For many elite Romans, true rest came not from sleep, but from control. They arranged their nights as they arranged their lives, according to pattern and precision. The chamber was cooled with dampened cloth, the bed layered with cushions stuffed with goose feathers, and a servant stationed quietly nearby should the master wish to be read to. Reading before bed was a refined custom. Philosophical texts, poetry, or letters were read aloud in calm, even tones, never too lively, never too somber. The sound itself was the medicine, a way to smooth the edges of thought. Imagine the rhythm of a voice reciting lines from Virgil or Horace, words flowing softly through the lamplight, while outside, the garden breeze and the city beyond fades into the hush of night. Some preferred to be read to from moral treatises, such as those of Seneca, the stoic calm of his words, reminding the listener of the impermanence of wealth and glory, acted as a kind of tranquilizer for the soul. In those moments, power and humility touched lightly, like silk against marble. Not all elite nights were peaceful, though. Rome was a city that never fully slept. The noises of carts, distant laughter, and drunken songs carried through the streets, reaching even the villas perched on the hills. Yet within those walls, the patrician's world remained sealed, designed to keep chaos outside and serenity within. Even the architecture itself, a harmony of symmetry and silence, was built to embody control. Over time, the habits of these wealthy knights would ripple outward, influencing the rituals of others. Perfumes, imported fabrics, and ideas about sleep and health spread through imitation. What began as luxury became aspiration. Even the simplest Roman might place a sprig of lavender by the bed, or whisper a brief prayer to Somnus, the god of sleep, hoping to borrow a fragment of the comfort known by those born into marble. But in the end, whether under silk or under straw, all Romans surrendered to the same darkness. Sleep, in its democracy, cared little for rank. The same gods watched over senators and servants alike. The same dreams drifted across class lines. In the stillness, the empire's grand distinctions blurred. The philosopher Epictetus, once a slave himself, wrote that even emperors must sleep under the same sky that shelters all men. To him, night was the great equalizer, a reminder that the essence of peace could not be purchased, only invited. So, as you drift deeper into calm, imagine those silent villas, moonlight pooling on polished floors, fountains murmuring to themselves, a scroll half-read beside a sleeping hand. Beyond the walls, the city hums, but within, stillness reigns. The bronze lamps flicker low, silk rustles faintly, and the night stretches endlessly across marble courtyards. Sleep, for the Romans, was never merely the absence of waking. It was a ritual of balance, a quiet victory of order over time. And as the final lamps dim, the empire dreams not of conquest, but of peace. When the masters of the house finally drifted towards sleep, the rhythm of Roman night did not end. It merely changed hands. As the patricians' breath softened and lamps burned low, the unseen world of servants began its quiet reign. Their lives unfolded in the dim hours. Duties performed not under the sun of empire, but beneath the glow of oil and ember. Imagine yourself now, not in the marble bedchamber of the master, but in the corridor just beyond. The air here is cooler, touched by the scent of wax and faint smoke. Bare feet move soundlessly across mosaic floors. A servant passes, carrying a shallow bronze tray with fresh coals to warm another room. Another crouches by a doorway, folding discarded linen with care. Their work was unseen. Their presence felt only through the results. A bed turned down, a lamp trimmed, a threshold swept clean before dawn. These were the familia urbana, the household staff that made aristocratic life possible. Their numbers could range from a handful in a modest home to hundreds in the villas of the wealthy. Each had a precise role. The cubiculaires tended the sleeping chambers. Lecticarii prepared the couches. Tractators managed clothing and bedding, and lamplighters, called lycnopii, oversaw the endless cycle of lighting and extinguishing flames. To be a servant in a Roman household was to live in rhythm with others' comfort. The night was not their time to rest, but their time to ensure the illusion of tranquility for those above them. They became experts in silence, trained to move without disturbing the calm. Even their gestures took on ritual quality. Folding, washing, tending, all with deliberate slowness, as though afraid that haste might shatter the fragile stillness of the house. In many ways, the servants were the unseen priests of domestic peace. They guarded not only material order, but spiritual harmony. Before extinguishing the final lamp, it was common for one to murmur a simple invocation to the Lares Familiars, household spirits believed to dwell in corners and hearths. A quiet prayer that no misfortune would disturb the slumber of their masters, and that the night might pass untroubled. For the enslaved, the night could bring a rare sense of solitude. When tasks were complete and rooms finally fell silent, they might steal a few moments of stillness for themselves. Archaeologists have found small amulets hidden in servant quarters, tiny carved faces, beads, or fragments of bone, sometimes with faint scratches of words like spes, hope, or pax, peace. These were tokens of endurance, quiet wishes cast into the endless current of Roman life. Servants and slaves were also the keepers of household continuity. They were the ones who remembered which child preferred which blanket, who noticed the subtle cough of an elder, who tended to the pets, the plants, the hearth. When masters came and went, when fortunes rose and fell, they remained, the pulse of daily survival beneath the grandeur of empire. Yet even in such stillness, fear was never far. A dropped cup, a candle left burning too long, a whispered mistake. These could invite reprimand, sometimes cruelly so. But within the architecture of obedience, there was also a quiet resilience. Many learned to navigate their world with grace, building small rituals of their own, humming softly as they polished silver, touching a doorway twice for luck, placing a palm over their chest before entering a room of sleeping masters. One might imagine a cubicularis, perhaps a young woman born in a distant province, standing by her mistress's bedside. The air smells faintly of rose oil. She listens to the breathing of the woman she serves, waiting for it to deepen before extinguishing the final lamp. The wick hisses softly, the shadows lengthen, and for a moment, she too allows her eyes to close. It is the closest thing to rest she will know until morning. Roman writers, mostly aristocrats, rarely recorded the inner lives of such people. Their existence was woven through other stories, glimpsed only in passing. Yet, their quiet endurance shaped the texture of Roman nights. The empire may have been ruled by senators and generals, but it was sustained by those who moved unseen, by those whose labor was measured in gestures so small they almost vanished into the air. Among the most haunting artifacts of this hidden world are the cursed tablets, thin sheets of lead inscribed with pleas or maledictions, often written by the enslaved. Some are found rolled tightly, pierced with nails, left in wells or graves. Many ask the gods not for vengeance, but for fairness, justice in a life that offered little of it. Others asked for peace, or simply to be remembered. To imagine these words whispered into the night is to glimpse the fragile humanity that persisted even in servitude. And yet, there were moments of quiet beauty too. Shared laughter over a task completed, a song hummed under one's breath, the gentle satisfaction of making the world orderly again. For all their hardships, servants were custodians of stillness, the keepers of calm within walls of wealth. Theirs was a nightly devotion to balance, to patience, to unseen care. As dawn approached, the rhythm of the household would reverse once more. The servants prepared the atrium for light, polished the bronze fittings, and ensured the fires were ready to blaze again. Their night of silence would dissolve into the noise of morning, their presence fading once more into invisibility. So, as you drift deeper into your own calm, imagine that quiet Roman house, not from the center of luxury, but from the shadows that kept it alive. Hear the soft creak of a door, the faint whisper of linen, the sigh of an extinguished lamp. For every sleeping patrician, there were many who stayed awake, maintaining the illusion of peace. And in their silence, in their endurance, there lies another kind of ritual, one not written in scrolls or marble, but in breath and patience. The rhythm of service became a kind of lullaby for the empire itself. Now, as your mind slows, imagine the final moments of that long night. The first gray light slipping between pillars, the faint chirp of birds, the servants standing quietly, watching dawn return. Their work unseen, their world fading into another day. As we reach the quiet heart of the Roman night, it becomes impossible not to notice the divide, the gentle, almost invisible line separating luxury from survival. Above, in marble villas scented with incense, patricians drifted into cultivated sleep. Below, in cramped quarters, the poor of Rome sought rest in a world that never truly stilled. Yet both, in the end, closed their eyes beneath the same vast Mediterranean sky. Imagine the city from above. The Tiber moves like a ribbon of shadow, cutting through the labyrinth of streets. Torches flicker in alleyways. Windows glow faintly, then fade. The murmur of the Subura, the city's most crowded district, never quite ceases. Voices, footsteps, distant laughter, the rattle of a cart will echoing against stone. This was the lullaby of the Roman poor, the background hum of life that both comforted and confined them. For most of Rome's population, night was a negotiation between exhaustion and survival. In cramped insulae, the towering apartment buildings of the city, families huddled in single rooms, their beds little more than straw mats or wooden planks. The walls were thin, the air thick with the mingled scents of cooking smoke, oil, and damp plaster. Fires were feared, yet light was precious. Many kept a single clay lamp burning low, a fragile flame to keep away not only the dark, but the uneasy sense of invisibility. Sleep for the poor was rarely continuous. The city's noises, the cold, or even hunger itself interrupted their rest. Many worked odd hours, bakers kneading dough through the night watchmen patrolling the streets, water carriers beginning before dawn. Others, too poor for lodging, slept beneath porticos or along the steps of temples. Ancient writers mention beggars curling beneath statues of gods, seeking both shelter and a kind of protection in their silent stone presence. And yet, within that hardship, there was still ritual. The poor had their own customs before sleep. Simple prayers to household spirits, whispered thanks for small mercies, the crossing of fingers against bad dreams. Parents would tell stories to children, tales of heroes or fables drawn from older days. The act of storytelling, even in squalor, was a form of order against chaos. Just as senators arranged their villas to express harmony, the poor arranged their words to make sense of life. In this way, Roman society mirrored itself in miniature. The elite used ritual to preserve power. The poor used it to preserve hope. And both, though divided by fortune, sought the same stillness, the same quiet surrender to the night. Consider the baker's workshop, glowing faintly in the dark. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of flour. Two figures work in silence, shaping loaves that will feed the city when morning comes. Nearby, a child sleeps on a pile of sacks, one hand curled against a lump of dough like a pillow. It is not comfort as the wealthy know it, but it is peace all the same, soft, fleeting, and deeply human. There is also, in these lower quarters, a peculiar intimacy with the divine. While the rich displayed elaborate shrines, the poor often made do with small tokens. Chalk drawings of Mercury on walls, rough figurines carved from clay. Archaeologists have found hundreds of such humble offerings. Crude, yet sincere attempts to bring a bit of protection into fragile lives. To those who owned little, even a small charm held meaning. In this city of sharp contrasts, sleep was one of the few common experiences that bound all together. The senator dreaming in silk and the beggar dozing beneath a portico were, for a few hours, equals in stillness. The philosopher Seneca once wrote that sleep levels all things. It makes the king and slave companions. His words drifted through a society built on hierarchy, but perhaps that was the point. The moment the eyes closed, the empire's layers softened, dissolving into breath and dream. Dreams themselves fascinated the Romans. Across all classes, they were seen as messages, sometimes divine, sometimes deceptive. The poor might interpret them as omens of luck or warning. The elite consulted interpreters and philosophers. Yet all shared the belief that sleep connected them, however briefly, to something greater. To close one's eyes was to step into a shared mystery, one that no wealth could control. In the early hours, when the city began to stir again, the contrast reasserted itself. Servants rose to polish marble floors. Street sweepers cleared the refuse of the night. Vendors set up their stalls, calling softly into the mist. The empire's machinery resumed its rhythm, and the fragile equality of dreams dissolved back into the structure of class. But if you listen closely to the creak of shutters, the murmur of prayers, the echoing footsteps, you can still sense a faint continuity. All Romans, rich and poor alike, were bound by the same ancient cycle. The labor of day, the surrender of night. The empire, vast as it was, breathed in unison through these two alternating acts. Now, as you imagine yourself drifting among those sleeping figures, think of the sky they shared. The constellations they traced with wonder, Orion, the scales, the twins, are the same stars that look down on you now. Time has washed away their temples, their palaces, their crowded tenements, but not their night. That remains unchanged, eternal, patient, gently watching. And perhaps that is the quiet truth at the end of all these rituals. Whether wrapped in silk or straw, whether guarded by slaves or by dreams, each Roman sought the same thing we all do. The moment when thought softens, breath deepens, and the weight of the world loosens its grip. So let your own thoughts drift now, as theirs once did. Imagine the hum of distant streets fading, the cool air brushing your face, the steady rhythm of life slowing all around you. The empire sleeps, and somewhere, beyond the reach of history, so do you, And now, as our journey through ancient Rome draws to its quiet end, the night around us feels a little older, a little deeper. The flickering lamps of history fade, leaving only their faint glow in memory. We have wandered through rituals both strange and soothing, through incense and whispers, through beans cast to the dead and silk laid carefully upon cool marble. The empire that once trembled with noise has fallen still again, and the rhythm of sleep overtakes all. The Romans, for all their power and pride, were not so different from us. They sought rest after long days, safety from the unseen, comfort in the familiar. They washed, they prayed, they read by dim light, and they dreamed of better mornings. Even their oddest rituals, the salt tossed into shadows, the charms hung above a bed, were, in their own way, gestures of hope, a way to make peace with the night. Imagine, for a moment, the whole of Rome asleep. From the palaces of the Palatine to the wooden rooms of the Subura, the city breathes in slow unison. The Tiber drifts by in silver silence. A watchman's torch flickers on a distant street, and the sky, vast and calm, bends low above it all. The empire dreams, not of conquest or glory, but of stillness, of balance, of another dawn. And here, in our own time, that same stillness waits for you. You have walked through marble corridors and crowded alleys, through the lives of emperors and servants, poets and bakers. Now, all that remains is quiet. Let the images fade. Let the sound soften. Let the weight of history settle gently around you, like dust on ancient stone. If this kind of soft storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like this video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, drifting to sleep with the same old stories. So close your eyes now. Let the gods whisper. Let the myths unfold. The sleepy historian will be here again soon, with another calm journey through the past. A little boring, perhaps, but perfectly so. For now, rest beneath the same stars that once watched over Rome. The night is endless. The city sleeps, and so should you.